Welcome back to this special edition of The Road to City Hall, where we are joining you from the Talking Transition Tent in Soho. 36% of New York residents are foreign-born, and there are at least 270 ethnic publications published here. Those media organizations serve an important service to their communities, and the folks behind them would like to see the next mayor make more of an effort to steer stories and advertising their way. Earlier this week, my next guest took part in a panel on the topic of ethnic media right here at the Transition Tent, and they came back tonight to continue the discussion with us. Joining me are Professor Sarah Bartlett, the incoming dean at the City University's Graduate School of Journalism. Juan Guillen is the founder and publisher of LatinTRENDS. And Gary Pierre-Pierre is publisher of the Haitian Times and executive director of CUNY's Center for Community and Ethnic Media. Thank you all for joining us. Good to see you. And Gary, let me start with you. The ethnic publications I just mentioned, there's a couple of hundred of them, but it's not just publications, right? I mean, we see them, the Irish Echo and El Diario at the newsstand, but there's a lot more going on, right?
Well, certainly. You have a robust radio landscape, you have television, and you have web-only publications. And they play a very vital role in the city. This last election, they were really covering the mayoral race and the other local races really intently. It was really important. A lot of the new Americans who read these publications depend on these publications for information about what's going on, because for the most part, it's published in their own language and they can understand it in a way that the mainstream press simply couldn't do.
Mm-hmm. So if you're an Arabic speaker or a Hindi speaker and you're voting for the first time, this is going to be the avenue through which you figure out what's going on at every level of government, right?
Well, certainly. For instance, the whole topic of the Muslim holiday, I mean, that was really something that the Pakistani and the Bangladeshi papers kind of pushed, and they really thought it was really important. And Mayor-elect Blasio appears to be supporting that. And I think that was a result of the advocacy of that media sector.
Okay, and the incoming dean of the CUNY J School, you were involved in a report, right, that looked at the connection between the advertising dollars that these publications get and the important role that they serve, suggesting that there's like sort of a mismatch there.
Well, what we looked at was the Bloomberg administration, like all administrations, has public advertising. So they'll do things like, where you can get free tax preparations or free flu vaccines, or where you might go for affordable housing units or jobs. So where they advertise those announcements is very important. If they only advertise in the mainstream media, it leaves a lot of New Yorkers out of the picture. So what we looked at was how much spending went from the Bloomberg administration's ad budget to those ethnic media publications. And it turns out that 82% of the $18 million was going to mainstream media, with very little sort of, the remainder dispersed among hundreds. So, so you'd see publications getting a couple $100s for a year, right, where the New York Post or the New York Daily News would be getting hundreds of thousands. So that's an issue that we tried to bring to the attention of the...
And Juan, that's especially troubling when you're talking about Spanish language media, right? I mean, Spanish is not some fringe language, right? We're not talking about something that only a few hundred people speak in New York.
Absolutely. Yeah, and when it comes to the Hispanic media outlets in New York, ethnic media, I think the number is even lower. I believe it's $18 million is spent, more or less. Out of that, the Hispanic media companies or ethnic Hispanic-owned media companies maybe represent 1% of that. And you know what? But when the community represents 28% of the total New York population, so 28% compared to 1%, something's wrong with that picture. It's unacceptable, because ethnic media, all ethnic media, they're very valuable because they have an emotional connection with their audience. They're right at the root, with the community. So, and I think it starts because they find these companies, the founders they start these companies not because they have dollar signs in their eyes, it's because they care about the community. So when you care about the community responds to you.
Well, now, how do you make the argument then? I mean, is this a value proposition saying, like, look, we've got special intimate connection to, say, the Haitian community or Spanish-speaking communities, or is it a different kind of a pitch that you make?
Well, it's just that. It's when you're an entity and you exist, there's a reason why you exist, right? There's a reason why these companies are started, because there's a need, there's a gap. There's a need from the community to have media companies that they can relate to, whether it's in their language or in their culture. Because in the Hispanic community, you have a portion that dominates Spanish, but you have another portion that dominates English, right? But just because the portion that dominates English, they still have a connection to their roots, and they have an emotional connection with anyone that cares about them.
But here's the thing, Gary. I mean, there are some advertisers, I imagine, and I'm thinking of McDonald's, for example. They get the big golden arches, they sell it worldwide. They don't particularly want to create an intimate relationship. They just want you to recognize, here's the golden arches, let me go buy some junk food.
Well, yes and no. At the same time, you want loyal customers. You want repeat customers. You just don't want to have mass advertising, which works fine instead of McDonald's. But let's stop for McDonald's a little bit. Let's talk about the city that has a message that resonates with the city, with the residents, and they need to really pitch that to a trusted source. That's what Juan is talking about, where when you advertise in one of these publications, there's a bond, there's a connection between the audience and the media that you really don't get in a lot of other sort of like general media outlets.
It's also much cheaper. I mean, the economic argument is this is public taxpayer money. It's more effective to spend that money on paying less for the pages of advertising and reach more people.
Well, the de Blasio campaign in particular made use of ethnic media, unless I'm mistaken, right?
I don't think they did much print advertising at all. I mean, it was really social media.
Interesting. In our last minute, how does this fit into the larger conversation? I mean, I'm asking because my first, my root and my hearts are in ethnic media. It was the first job I took out of college rather than going to the Wall Street Journal. But, 30 plus years later, you've got the same issue of how do you make any kind of publication, ethnic, mainstream, anything else, how do you make it profitable or at least sustainable?
Every publication under the sun right now is facing that issue. Certainly the print publications have the worst time, but actually these organizations are doing better than most because they have such a loyal audience and because they're weekly, not daily, so their cost structure is a little bit different. Those papers sit around on kitchen tables for a full week. A lot of people pass them around, so in terms of an advertiser, it's an effective tool.
I think there's an opportunity now with digital media for us to find a way to monetize that, because the cost is significantly lower with digital media. And if we can find a way to get some advertising, I think we're almost there.
Well, I would say to that is that the key point here is that, what do you say to advertisers? It's the reality. The reality is that in today's world, because of globalization, because of technology, it has become very difficult to engage people. It has become very difficult to connect with an audience because we're hit with so many impressions. We're so busy. Now we have the internet. Now it's just a different environment than what it was 20 years ago. That's when the ethnic media kicks in because they're at the root with the community. They're in constant contact with the community because they start first by caring and they have that emotional connection. So it's very real connection and very effective for advertisers.
Okay, that is going to be the last word. Juan Guillen, thanks for coming in. Gary Pierre-Pierre, always good to see you. Dean Sarah Bartlett, good to see you as well. We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, I'll be joined by 3 city principals to hear what changes they would like to see the de Blasio administration make in our school system and what Bloomberg-era reforms they might like to keep. Stay with us.